All right, and welcome back to the Movie Pope podcast. And I hope everybody is doing great today. Today we have another great guest with us. We've got Bradley Smith here. He's going to chat with us about his life, his music career, well, his musical theater career, I should say, and his upcoming podcast that he's doing with a friend of his. But before we dive in, remember to like, comment, subscribe, and please share this video and other episodes like it with everyone that you know. Help the channel grow. And as always, thank you so much for watching. And let's go ahead and dive in. Bradley, sir, how are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm excited to get on here and talk about stuff for a while.
I was going to say, you have the distinctive honor of being the last guest I interview for 2023. So wear that with pride, my friend. So just a background, Bradley and I used to work together at a company, and that's how we met. And you actually trained me in my starting position before I graduated up. And during that time there, we've had many interesting conversations, but the audience may not be privy to your origin story. So why don't you go ahead and start off and tell us about yourself, who you are, what you do, and what your plans are. It's a loaded question, so
No, that's fair. So I will say the especially the theater side, which is mostly what I do now. It actually started, oh God, 1,000 years ago, when I was in, oh God, 6th grade. They came to our class and talked to us about joining band. Well, at the time, I had never really thought about it, but band they did in 7th and 8th grade because where I grew up, we didn't have middle schools. We just had elementary, which was K-8, and then high school.
right.
So what they did for band is they had one teacher who, this blows my mind still, who would drive to all of the elementary schools in the county, and he was the band teacher. And then at the end of the year, he would put all of those bands together and do a concert with like 200 kids. So at the time, I honestly only joined because we used to have what were called connect classes, which were like PE, music, art, something in the media center. They were kind of boring, to be honest. So if you joined band, you got to miss 2 connect classes a week. So that was honestly the reason I joined in the first place. And then I did band in elementary school. I did it in high school just because it felt natural to keep doing band. And that was my family. I mean, any band kid in high school can definitely tell you that is your family. That's who you hang out with. That's who you spend time with, you go on trips with. Everyone I've ever dated at this point in my life, I've met through music. And when I was in high school, around the time you're starting to apply for colleges, I was thinking about becoming maybe a veterinary technician. I got involved in animal science in high school, and that was kind of my plan. And then I went to an honor band clinic my junior year of high school towards the very end. And I auditioned. I remember I was bottom chair of 2 bands. So I was literally like the worst saxophonist there, which is fair. Well, we did our concert, and then I got to hear the first band go. And that was the first time where I was like, oh my God, this is what music is supposed to be. This is what it could do. This is what it could be. So that just completely changed the track of my life, because now it was like, no, I want to go into music. I want to do this more. I want to be involved in stuff like this. So I ended up applying for schools. My band director in high school, she went to Mars Hill College, because it was college at the time. And she told me about it. I applied for them. And then when I went to audition, because for the music schools, you do have to audition to get into the music program, and then you have to apply to get into the school as well.
Right.
So I auditioned for a couple different schools, and it really was one of those things where, like, as soon as I got to Mars Hill, I'm like, this is better than all the other schools I've been to. I wasn't going to, because some of the schools, when they're really big, especially in the music program, your first couple years, you're not taking lessons from the teacher. You're taking lessons from another student. Like one of the upperclassmen does lessons for like your first 2 years, which to me is still kind of weird, but whatever. I got to Mars Hill, and I literally auditioned for the band director and the head of the instrumental program. So it wasn't one of these things where I was going to be taking lessons from a student or anything like that. It was a smaller school. It was a little far. It was about 4.5 hours. Well, 3.5 to 4, I should say. Um, it's close to Asheville, and it just was a good school. So I ended up going there for music. At first, I was going to be music education, and then I kind of switched curriculums a little later. So I played saxophone. I guess I probably should have said that up front. I did end up playing saxophone, and that's what I went to school for. And so I was very, very musically involved. I never got involved in theater until after. So after college, I just started working a job. I knew student loans were right around the corner. I told myself I would look for a music-based job a little later, and then I just never did. I just started working and was just working every chance I could get. And then maybe a year and a half later, it started to hit me that I wanted to get involved in music again. Well, at that point, I had pretty much put saxophone down. And even now, I don't really play anymore, which is a little sad. I've still got my saxophone, but I don't really play it anymore. But at the time, I got involved with my church. I was singing at church every chance I could. And then I ended up getting a job, which is actually at the place where we ended up meeting in Mint Hill, which was just a bit far for me to make it to choir rehearsal. And around this time, my aunt had retired, and she got involved in theater after she retired. So she had talked to me about auditioning when they did Mary Poppins, and I just don't like Mary Poppins very much. And then I think the following year they were doing Cinderella, and she had talked to me about auditioning, and it was one of those just perfectly lined up things where right around the time I was like, I need to find another way to get involved in music. She talks to me about auditioning for a musical. And, I sang a bit in college. I was in choir. A couple of years I was in college. My fraternity had a men's choir where I would sing a lot. And then while I was in college, a lot of the instrumental people, once you're there for a few years, you start branching out a bit. So you wouldn't just play your instrument. You would maybe pick up another instrument or maybe join a few different ensembles and just kind of see what happens. So my college roommate, he played trombone, but he also played tuba, and then he started playing piano. For me, I started to pick up trumpet as well as saxophone, and then I started singing. And I was very insecure about it. I wouldn't really sing around people that much, which is very strange to think of now. But that was when I kind of started singing. And then when I auditioned for a theater show, I mean, I had this big tenor voice that I had kind of worked on for years without really thinking about it. So then I got involved in theater, and it's been absolutely nonstop ever since. I've just auditioned for show after show. I've music directed a lot of shows. I would like to be a professional singer and or performer. I do enjoy acting. I love theater, but to be honest, I only really got involved in theater as a way to get to sing more. So even now, like if with like the big three, people talk about like triple threats. So you got the singing, the acting, and the dancing. I am, in all humility, a very good singer. I'm a pretty good actor, and I mean, I can move. I'm a very big guy, but I can move pretty well. But I'm not a dancer. So yeah, that was when I got involved in theater, and then just the more and more that I have done shows, the more involved I've gotten, the more I'm just like, yeah, this is what I've been wanting to do my whole life, and it just took me a little while to find it.
So you never did theater prior to what you did with with your aunt's theater a few
Yeah,
years ago, right?
yeah, that was the first. I went to theater productions when I was in high school. I went to theater productions when I was in college. I knew a lot of people in the theater department in both of those places, but no, I never did any kind of theater stuff in high school or in college. And then Cinderella, I think it was 2018. The summer of 2018 was when I got involved with that, and that was with the URI players,
Hmm.
which are the theater that's the closest to me by a landslide. Most of the stuff I do is in Concord or Salisbury, which is about 35 minutes away or an hour away. URI Players is like 12 minutes away. So yeah, I was the king in Cinderella. I was the only guy in the group that was over the age of like 21. So I was definitely going to be the king, and I had a blast. It's very funny because the first scene that you see the king, the queen is fixing his pants. So literally the first time I'm on stage, I'm standing there in my underwear. It was like fake underwear, so it's basically a pair of shorts, but it was very funny. I remember it was very difficult when they first made it because the material that they used, it felt almost like denim, and in the scene I had to put my pants on top of it, and I was like, dude, these shorts are so thick I can't get my pants on. Like, I can't actually button my pants on top of these. But it was a lot of fun. And then from there is when I started music directing as well, because the music director of that show, she and I were just talking, and she's like, you're clearly very musically trained. And I was like, yes. So she at that point was going to take a year off from music directing with a local theater company because it was her daughter's senior year of high school. I think she wanted to just kind of spend some more time with her. So that was when I started music directing. She asked me if I would be interested, and I music directed 2 shows with the talent company in Albemarle. And then this is another thing, man. It just like one thing after another, where the director of the second show, she really liked me and liked working with me. And she's like, hey, I'm about to direct a show in Salisbury and I need a music director. Would you be interested in music directing? Absolutely. Yeah, because at this point, I've music directed about 6 or 7 shows. I have literally never applied to be a music director. I've never put in an application. I've never made like a pitch for it. I've just been asked to music direct shows. Even the upcoming one with Postmortem, as soon as they were like, we're doing a musical, looked right at me. I was like, would you like to music direct? Absolutely.
Well, that's a pretty good CV right there, because because most of the time people kind of have to work to try to get to that position, but it was literally handed to you, and figuratively speaking. So so I remember you telling me a lot about music directing. Can you talk about what are the nuances? What goes into directing musical theater? Is it anything like directing regular theater?
It's for me, no, just because I'm on the music side of it so much. I don't try to do any regular directing in it just because I don't want to step on the director's toes.
Okay.
There are a few times where if something in a music, and it's like a song or in a scene, if there's something that musically is going on where I'm like, this is causing an issue or this isn't making the scene work, then I might say something. Or if the director ever asks me, I'll certainly say something. But yeah, when it comes to music directing, usually you've got, if it's a show where you do have dancing, which I think pretty much all the shows I've done have had some level of dancing. You usually have your choreographer, your director, and your music director. Usually we all try to stay in our lanes to make sure that we don't step on each other's toes. I will say, when I first started music directing, I had said that I would do it, absolutely. And immediately I'm like, what am I doing? I have no idea how to do this. I've never music directed. I don't know what I'm doing. And then as soon as I sat down for the first rehearsal, within 10 minutes, I'm like, oh no, I got this. Like, because even now I get people that ask me a lot, like, have you taken voice lessons? Where did you, I was like, no, I've never had any kind of voice lessons. I've never had any formal teaching on voice, but I'm very, very musically trained on the instrumental side. So when I got involved in theater, when I got involved in singing, I literally just applied everything I had learned and been taught on the instrumental side to the singing side. So when it came time to start music directing, I mean, really, I tend to run it. Music rehearsals are mostly just like a choir rehearsal.
Okay.
That's usually what it breaks down to, is teaching people parts, working with soloists to make sure everything, sounds good. I have also always told people that if you ever need help with something on like a more one-on-one thing, or If you want to spend a bit of time together outside of rehearsal working on something, I will always make myself available for that. I remember when I did Little Women a couple years ago, I had one guy who was like, got it, I will take absolute advantage of that. And we basically did mini voice lessons like once or twice a week, the entire run of the show. And by the end of it, I mean, he was 10 times as better of a singer than he was when we started.
So what goes on in directing, someone who's a soloist or an ensemble? Do you kind of tell them, hey, maybe you need to change the pitch this way, or maybe change it to a different key? Like, how does that work?
So sometimes it is key related. Ultimately, when you're casting a show, you cast the best of who you have to audition. With this being community theater, it's especially guys. You just have trouble getting guys that can sing.
Mhm.
When we did Godspell a couple years ago, it can be a fairly small cast anyway. But for us, when we did auditions, we only had 2 guys show up. One of them, it was his first musical. And then the other one, God bless him, he just couldn't really match pitch that well. He wasn't that good of a singer. Well, you've got 2 male leads in this, being Jesus and Judas, that they sing a lot. And they sing what can be some pretty taxing stuff. So then it's a question of like, well, what do you do at that point? So, sometimes with people, I've had to lower or raise the overall key of things. So maybe if it's a bit high, we'll bring it down a bit. Sometimes adjusting tempos and things like that. But usually for soloists, I try to let them do what they want to do. And then if it ever becomes a thing where I'm like, this is going too far, you're doing a bit too much, or it just doesn't quite sound good, then I will help them. But I usually tell soloists that if it's a solo song, for the most part, I'm going to try to let you do your thing. I don't want to limit their creativity. I don't want to try to tell them what I would do, just because I don't want that. There's a kind of thing with theater where a lot of people will listen to someone else do something and then they imitate that. And
Right.
ultimately, I tell people, I'm like, I didn't cast that person, I cast you. I didn't want them, I wanted you. I wanted your version of this. So you tend to run into that, especially with younger people, where they really try to mimic something that they've seen or heard before, which is fine. There is a certain level of that I understand. But ultimately, it is working with them to make sure that they are the best version of their unique version of this that they can do. And then for the ensemble stuff, it's just putting everything together, making sure that you've got your parts covered, which I think every show I've done, I say that the last couple I've done, I've just ended up having to like kind of cut some parts because we just don't have enough people. Community theater, it can be hard to get people in shows. Some of them not. When I just did Jekyll and Hyde, I mean, we had a monster cast from day one. When I did Titanic with Queen City Concerts, when I did Ragtime with Piedmont, I mean, the just monstrously musically talented cast, and we breezed through all of the music for both of those shows, and those are both very difficult shows. So I mean, you never know what you're going to get.
So actually that leads me to another question, because I've had Chris Stonnell on the podcast 3 times now, and Chris, is a mutual friend of ours. He was telling me how difficult it can be sometimes to work with community theater. I mean, do you think that's a disadvantage or an advantage for you when you're trying to create like a really, really good production?
Both, definitely both. I've done some community theater shows with people who were quote unquote professional performers. Some of them have been very difficult to deal with. Some of them, and I say this in the nicest way possible, which is some of them have egos very unbefitting their talent.
So basically divas,
basically. Yeah, 100%. Okay. And those people kind of bother me. Like, ultimately, we are here. I always tell people that, because I've done shows before where particularly people in the ensemble will be like, I'm not that important. And I'm like, are you crazy? You're on stage the whole show. You sing in every number, you dance in every number, you're on stage the whole time. How could you possibly not think that you're important to this? It's not just the soloist. I always think of it like a sports team. This person, this lead, they might be the quarterback, but if they say down set hut and there's no one in front of them, they're going to get trampled. Some people tend to think of it very much as like a one person show or two. It's not. Even shows where I've done, I mentioned Little Women. Little Women is very close to a one woman show. I think I looked at it one time, and every single song in the show, there are only 3 songs in the show that are not either sung by the main character, to the main character, or about the main character. It's so, but even still, you've got a lot of very important parts on stage, and that one you've got a family. So it can be a little hard sometimes going back and forth between some professional people and some community theater people. I will say Chris has a bit of a different background than me because he's done professional stuff in theater. And I mean, I personally have been paid to perform a few times, but it's only ever like as a singer. It's never been, I haven't been paid to do any like theater shows yet.
Like management stuff, right?
Yeah. So yeah, when I music direct, I do get paid for it. And I've been paid to be like a soloist or a singer for a few things. But the only like acting related thing I've done, I did a murder mystery a couple years ago. That was like a weekend long murder. I died. A weekend long murder mystery thing. So yeah, Chris has definitely done more on the professional side. I want to do more on the professional side. I'm still kind of working into it. I'm still
Yeah,
a little new to this.
yeah, and I remember in the conversations we've had in the past, you said your ultimate goal was to work in professional theater, namely Broadway.
Yep.
And I remember you also telling me about I think this was like either last year or a few months ago. You were telling me about wanting to join a traveling theater group. Can you talk
Yeah.
about that?
Yeah, I do want to get to Broadway eventually. That is the goal. That's the dream job. I want to perform professionally. I have for quite a while now. For me right now, where I am, with us being in North Carolina, it, I want to get involved in theater in Charlotte, but beyond that, to try to do it professionally here, there's not a whole lot of other options to do it,
No.
professionally full time. It's pretty much, Charlotte or bust. But if you get on with the traveling group, I mean, ultimately, I'm like, hey, you get to travel and you get to perform at the same time. That's a win-win for me. I would really like to do it. I'm still, I feel old, but I'm still young enough that I think that now's a really good time to do that. And I just love the idea because I've done tours before when I was in college. Is much shorter term, but we would do band tour, we would do choir tour, where we would literally get on a bus and you travel around to different venues, different performances, stay in hotels, whole 9 yards. And it was really fun to do that. Even just on that college level, I would like to do that more professionally, more long term. And I love the idea of doing a show where everyone is absolutely on their A game, the whole time. Because for me, I pick stuff up very fast. I move very fast. So when I do theater shows, my stuff is usually down pat pretty quickly. And sometimes I wish that was a bit more standard across the board, where people really, as soon as we get access to the script, as soon as you get the music, it is full steam ahead. Sometimes, unfortunately, you do have shows where a lot of people don't learn their stuff until Tech Week, which is the week before you open. That bothers me. So sometimes I wish people would pick stuff up a bit faster, because when you pick that stuff up faster, then you get to refine it more. I always tell people that music doesn't really happen until you get off the page. When you're still working on notes and rhythms, you're still on survival mode. As soon as you get it memorized, as soon as you know it well enough that you're not still having to look at it all the time, that's when you can really start making music with it. So that's one thing I really like about the idea of a professional group, is I want to get there faster. I want to start really moving to the next level a bit quicker, really.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, I would love to be with a traveling group. I would love to get with a group of people, put together a great show, and then take it on the road.
Yeah, because I remember talking to Chris a few weeks ago when we were discussing Christmas spirits. He said that his eventual goal is to is to expand postmortem to to a point where they can travel, if not around the Carolinas, then around the around North Carolina and kind of putting up performances. I mean, do you envision yourself doing something similar in the
Oh yeah,
future, or
yeah.
okay?
We talked about it because with postmortem, I'm on like the committee for postmortem as well. So we when we did monster songs, we talked about taking that to a number of different venues around the area and performing it, because it was a great show in the sense that it could be done almost concert style. So it was
Mhm.
just music, and then there's one character that has a little bit of like tie-in into each scene. It wasn't a full show, so you didn't need big scene changes or whatnot, um, or a big set. So we had talked at the time about taking that one to different areas around here, and it just didn't quite materialize with that show. With Christmas Spirits, he is going to do that, pretty much every year. I say we, Postmortem did just finish their Christmas Spirits for this year, which was the Innocents.
Right,
I think it just
right,
closed a
right.
week ago.
Yeah.
Um, so they also did a show before that called Catch the Butcher. That is a kind of similar thing where it's a pretty small show. It's got some practical blood effects that people really enjoyed. It's a very good show. It's very enjoyable, and I think he's still talking about maybe doing that one, kind of bringing that back, and then going to a few areas around here. Because for the most part, when you go to see a theater show, it's like the old courthouse theater is the theater that the two of us do most of our stuff with. When Postmortem does its shows, most of them are at OCT, so the old courthouse theater. But if you go see something at old courthouse, you're seeing something at old courthouse. You don't tend to see them go somewhere else and do a show or travel at all with their show. And that is typically the way that most theaters do it. When you go see a show at a theater, that's that company, that's their theater, that's their space, that's it. I don't know of many non-professional companies that go around to other venues, go around to other places. So it would be really cool to basically have a theater show come to me and be able to just go downtown to where I am and see a group from Concord or see a group from Charlotte, and they've brought their theater show here, or they brought their concert here, or their show, or whatever it is, and then get to see it here. I think that'd be really cool because there's not a lot of groups doing that.
Yeah, because I remember back in the day as a kid, I remember Opera Carolina and the Children's Theater, going from one school to another, putting on performances, and I thought that was like one of the best things that they ever did because, well, one, you got a day off from from going to class and having to
Yeah.
do work, but also too, it was interesting just to see that there was a theater scene in Charlotte and they were performing right in front of you.
Yeah.
Um, so I think what you guys would be doing would be pretty cool if, especially now with es- excuse me, especially now with a lot of schools cutting the arts programs just because of budgets. I think
Yeah.
you guys would be better served, just going to these places and kind of just reminding them, hey, maybe it's not such a good idea to cut this because this is the kind of outlet, creative outlet that we can provide to these students who may not have any other options.
Yeah. And that is one thing I really do like about being involved with Chris, is that Chris is very has his foot set firmly in the education side because he does work with Children's Theater of Charlotte.
Mhm.
So he definitely knows about the education side. He's lived a life in theater. He knows a lot about the education side and why it would be important. Also, in just working with Chris, he's got a lot of experience in sides of this that I don't. So I was very impressed the first show I did with him with Postmortem when it came to like practical effects. So some of the stuff that he does in theater shows blows my mind. Some of the I mentioned earlier about the prosthetic stuff or some of the fake blood stuff. That's cool. But really, when I did a show with him, it's the use of fog, it's the use of lights, it's the use of very specific sound effects, and I've got to give it to him. Chris does it better than anyone I've ever met. I remember when I did Christmas Spirits with him last year, dude, some of the sound effects that he did, I'm like, this is creepy. Like I'm a part of the show, and this is creepy.
I mean, it
Um,
works. I mean,
Dude, it does. Literally in that show, I died in that show. And the sound effect for my character having their neck broken, I'm like, dude, that's gross. I love it. Because I love spooky stuff. I love scary stuff. So him doing, and Chris does too, obviously. But him starting postmortem players it's just perfect. It's a group I love doing stuff with. And I love Chris. I love getting to work with him pretty much any chance I get to. So yeah, postmortem, dude, I could definitely see it. That group has a lot of talent. There's a lot of passion and a lot of experience. And when you put those things together, stuff's going to get done. It just has to be.
Well, I was going to say what's also impressive too, and he's brought this up, the two times that he's been on the podcast. I mean, what he's doing is pretty innovative as well, because there really isn't like a horror themed, theater company that, out there, especially here in the South, the Southeast, of the United States. So I think what he's doing there is pretty unique, because it's not something that you normally see. I mean, there are a lot of Shakespeare companies out there, but when it comes to the stuff that he's doing, it's very unique, and it caters to to a particular audience and a particular aesthetic that that not many people get a chance to see any other time of the year outside of Halloween.
Yeah, absolutely. And that you definitely just said one of the big phrases for us being postmortem. Is a lot of people will do something kind of spooky at Halloween, and then that's it. But I mean, the people who love spooky stuff, they don't go anywhere. They're still here. So we're talking about maybe doing like a haunted house type thing in July, doing spooky related stuff throughout the year instead of just doing it at Halloween. And dude, I've seen it when postmortem does shows. Dude, people show up, even though there's shows that maybe they haven't heard of, or the fact it's a theater company that people haven't heard of. As soon as they hear postmortem players, they're like, they do spooky stuff. So many people are like, sign me up, I'm there. Absolutely. And then when they come, dude, postmortem puts on fantastic shows. I mean, they've been absolutely great. I'm not just saying that because I've been in some of them, but they've been a good time, man. And Chris is just such a talented person to work with.
Yeah, and he's so knowledgeable too. Like, just have like the last episode we did. My God, I mean, the guy is an encyclopedia
Dude,
of
he
everything.
is.
Like,
I was
I was blown away. I'm like, so tell me about Grand Guignol, and he just goes into. I'm like, God damn, like, what did I get myself into?
Dude, he kills me. In the theater side, is there so many times where we will mention, oh yeah, I like this show, and he's like, that's cool, and he pulls out his phone and he's like, here's a picture I took with the writer of that show. Oh, you like this actor? I ran into them in New York years ago. Here's a picture of us. I'm like, dude, seriously, stop bragging. Like so many times where we can talk about a theater thing or a movie thing or an idea. And he is, yeah, when you say he's like an encyclopedia, that's the best way I can think of to put it, is that he has such a knowledge base that is genuinely impressive, that he's built for years, but then he's got the talent level on top of it. And him starting his own theater company, it's just like, yeah, absolutely, you should.
Like, it makes
And
sense.
it does, 100%.
I mean, we can gush on about Chris, all day. And Chris, if you're watching, we love you, and I plan on having you coming back next year for more episodes. But I want to shift gears a little bit, because there's another passion project that you were telling me about that you started recently, and it's your podcast. Can you dive into the origins of that and what prompted you to record your first few episodes?
Yeah, so I'm very much into theater. I will say for me, it's very specifically musical theater, because I do love the music side of it.
Right.
But another big thing for me always has been film. I have loved movies since I was a kid, back when video stores were a thing. I used to drive my mom when I was young. It was books and movies. I used to drive my mom crazy to take me to the library and to take me to the video store. And I used to hate that they would limit the number of things that we could get at a time. It used to drive me crazy. So I got involved, very, very involved in film for a long time. I still am, still love going to movies, talking about movies. Well, my best friend, Brendan, he went to school for film study. He's directed I think a couple of films now. He does a lot of video editing, and we have been friends for a very long time. God, we've known each other since we were 4. And we, a number of years ago, would hang out with a couple of other friends of ours, and Brendan, we would just talk, and we would talk about movies and TV shows and video games and all sorts of stuff. And Brendan used to say, he's like, dude, we should just put a microphone in between all of us when we do this. And I was like, haha, yeah, whatever. I will say he started saying that long ago enough that I didn't even know what a podcast was. So this was, oh God, 2014-ish, I think, was around the time he started saying that.
Right.
Maybe
That's
even,
when podcasts were, in their infancy.
yeah, I was like, maybe even a little bit before that. And then a couple years ago, right around the time that I started to really get involved in theater and I wanted to get involved in music again, he had a very similar thing with film and with writing. He wanted to get involved in both of those again. So he was like, hey, I mentioned us doing this years ago, but maybe this is something we should do. And I was like, absolutely, I'm down. We mentioned earlier a bit about Dead Meat, the channel on YouTube, Dead Meat, and both of us watched their podcast, listened to their podcast, watched their videos, and there is a certain level of that looks like so much fun. Maybe we should do that.
I mean, it's so, and I mentioned this before we started recording. It's so funny how so many so many of us would watch that and think to ourselves, I could do a podcast like that, and we go off on different tangents, but we all start from the same origin point,
Dude, it is just crazy that, because when I first started that channel in particular, I started watching the kill counts way before I ever got into the podcast, because in my mind, and I'm not gonna lie, there is still a part of me that thinks this, which is very ironic considering I have one. The idea of a podcast for me, it's got to be good. The idea of sitting listening to someone talk for an hour, there's a certain level where I'm like, that's a bit much. But if you've got someone who's interesting, it's like it goes by in a second. You want more. So with those guys, with James and Chelsea, I adore them so much that once I got involved in the podcast, that was it, dude. I was just episode after episode after episode. So when Brendan mentioned the idea of doing one, I'm like, yeah, it looks fun. It sounds fun. I feel like we would make a good one. So with Brendan and I, it's very different personalities. So he is very like the analytical one, the one that does a lot of really the deep dive stuff into research in particular. I am the much more animated person. So whenever we talk back and forth, and we've always been that way, our personalities are just that way, where I'm very loud. I tend to be very rambunctious, and he's much more reserved. So the two of us together, it makes for an interesting listen. And then both of us, we really like doing deep dives into things. And yeah, we've already done a few video games. We just did a movie. We're going to do TV shows. We're going to do research episodes, maybe play some games at some point in time. I do know at some point in time we want to stream some video games just so that we can show me beating Brendan and all of these different video games. But yeah, honestly, it was just fun. It was just the idea of sitting down with your best friend and doing a bunch of videos about stuff you guys love. So we get to do deep dives into movies, TV shows, books that we really enjoy. There are a few episodes where I'm like, oh God, we're going to talk so much. Both of us love The West Wing. It's our favorite TV show. I know when we get around to talking about The West Wing, we're in trouble. I was like, dude, we're going to talk so much. But yeah, the channel is called Story Proof. We've recorded a few episodes so far, and we haven't actually started posting them yet. We're still very new into the editing side and the recording side. So once we start posting them, we are going to try to post on a regular schedule. So Brendan wanted to have a few kind of in the chamber, just so that we could make sure if we did get a little stumped with recording in the beginning, that we would have a few for regular releases. So we started with oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say I totally understand where he's coming from, because that's the same mentality I started off when in June when we started our podcast.
Yeah, and recording for us has just been very hectic. I would love to say it's both of our schedules. It's mine. It's 100% been mine. When you're doing a theater show, you do reach a point where you become pretty unavailable. Like the last maybe month of the show, especially if you're music directing, you're there all the time. So he with our work schedules, we were only able to record 2 days a week. So if I ever had something on those 2 days, we would just have to skip that week. And the way that we talk and the length of the episodes, I've thrown around the idea of us recording maybe 2 at a time. But I mean, we usually record 3-4 hours for one episode, and then he edits it down to a reasonable length.
Yeah, no, and I was gonna say, like, the best format that we've come up with is we usually record every other Saturday, and we usually do at least 2 or 3 episodes or recording sessions that day, and then that kind of gives us 3 weeks worth of material because we usually post them on Fridays.
Yeah, I think that is something closer to what I would like to do. When I mentioned the fact that Brendan and I are probably going to move in together within the next year or so, I think once we, especially living together, we could have like a definitive recording space. I think that alone would make it a lot easier to record consistently. And then us having a schedule. That's what I was telling him as well, is I would like to sit down and not necessarily schedule out like the whole year, but at least a couple months in advance, so that we know definitively this movie on this day, this TV show on this day. Because it takes a little while. The one.
Oh yeah. Oh
the
yeah,
one,
I totally know. I totally understand where you're coming from, man. That's why Microsoft Excel is my best friend.
Yeah, I completely get that. This the one that we just did was for a movie. It was Resident Evil: Welcome to Raccoon City, and I literally wrote down like my notes and things for the movie. Dude, it was like 20 pages of stuff when all was said and done. So it takes a little bit of time, but it's so much fun. When we hang out and we just start recording, just us talking about stuff that we love. We did start with Resident Evil. So we did the first 3 games, so 1, 2, and 3, the remakes, and then we did Welcome to Raccoon City, which is a movie that encompasses Resident Evils 1, 2, and 3. After that, we are going to branch out and do some different stuff. Not quite sure yet where we're going to go, but yeah, when you mentioned this covering the face of pop culture, I mean, we're going to do all sorts of stuff, and for us, it's just fun. It's just a lot of fun to get together and talk about very specific subjects. We are going to do a few theater-related episodes. I'm trying to get Brendan to write a play that Postmortem could do. So he's working on that sort of slowly, little bit by little bit. So it's interesting to see where that might lead to in the future.
Well, I was going to say, because and I've mentioned it several times, throughout the podcast series, but but it's so easy to do a movie review podcast, because anybody can just set up and say, well, this is what I like or don't like about the movie. I mean, my God, I mean, you could just type it into YouTube and you'll pull up with millions of searches. I think the trick is to try to find a unique angle where it's like, oh, well, this is something that nobody else has done. I think I'll check out and see what they're doing. Have you and Brandon kind of discussed like what your angle is going to be, or what kind of style is going to make you stand out from like other podcasts, like Dead Meat, or I don't know, the Movie Pope?
I would love to say yes, but no. Not necessarily. I kind of think it's just going to be one of those things where you just kind of latch onto someone's, like, I guess, personality. That sounds a little cheesy, but I know for me, all of the YouTube channels that I watch, I love horror movies, but if I did not personally like James and Chelsea, I would not watch that channel. Some of the other YouTubers that I watch, there's even one guy that he covers a video game I don't even play anymore, but he still covers the game, and I just like him. I just like his personality. I like the way he talks about things.
Yeah.
And I like I mentioned earlier, that for me, a lot of podcasts are just maybe a bit much. I don't like them as much. But there's ones called Inside of You with Michael Rosenbaum.
Yeah. The guy from Smallville and The Flash.
And see, for me, I've never watched Smallville. I've seen him. I knew he was in it, and I've like seen enough of it to know of him. But when I first watched an episode, I didn't even recognize him, mostly because he had hair. But I didn't even recognize who he was. I looked him up. I'm like, holy crap, I know this guy from a ton of stuff. And that's one of those things where I like him. I just like him talking with people about things. That one I particularly enjoy because they talk about mental health a lot. And I definitely feel like that's something that, frankly, we just need to get more comfortable with talking about.
Yeah.
But he brings a lot of very interesting people on there. And I love his channel. I love his podcast. And it's just because I love him. Ultimately, he is just sitting down and talking with people about stuff. But I particularly enjoy that one because I just enjoy him. So that's kind of what I think. I think if people watch us or listen to us, I think even if they like what we're talking about, but they find us boring, they're not going to listen to us. But with us doing a little bit of everything, I think maybe people will either like us that they'll watch and listen, or if they do like the particular thing we're talking about that week or that series that we're doing, that maybe they'll tune in at that point. I will say for me, I'm just doing it for fun. This is very much Brendan's thing. This channel was his idea. At least right now, he's doing the editing for it. I'm very much along for the ride, and then I do help with like the planning side of it and us figuring out what we're going to do. But I do feel like it's very much his thing.
Right. Um, I totally get that. Just because there's always one person, when you're doing a podcast, there's always that one person who's kind of more involved than the other. That's not knocking the other person. It's just you
No,
kind of need that
it's
other
true.
person.
Yeah, I mean it's 100% true. It especially kills me because when I watch, and I'm not trying to say like this is their thing, but when we talk about Dead Meat, when you talk about James and Chelsea, especially in research episodes, is really where it's like Chelsea does a lot of the research. She's the very analytical side, and then James is there to do his side and almost like be the personality type for it. And there's so many times where Brendan and I are talking, we're like, God, this is just crazy how much we almost mirror what they are, and it's just our personalities. It's just sort of the way that we are. Not to say that I'm not analytical, but you talk about a walking encyclopedia. Brendan, I joke with him all the time that he's never forgotten a single thing. He is just a walking encyclopedia of everything.
Well, you want to know what's ironic is the fact that I went to school, and majored in film production, but Lee, my God, that guy, I mean, that guy is just he knows everything about movies. Like he puts me to shame. And
Yeah.
That's the reason why he's the movie pope. It's because he's got the credibility to tell me, yeah, your movie choices suck, dude. I'm like, okay, I'm not gonna argue with you. You're the movie pope. I'm sorry your moviness. Please forgive me. Um so I want to go ahead and wrap it up, but before we do, if people want to reach out to you, if they want to check out your work, where can they do that?
So the channel is going to be called Story Proof. The channel itself has been created. We just haven't actually uploaded anything yet. Especially once we get kind of up and going, we're going to be letting people know, hey, if you want us to maybe review or do any particular thing, or if you have any ideas for us, just let us know. Those will probably end up being like comments on YouTube videos. For right now, if anyone for any reason wants to reach out to us, just storyproof at gmail.com. There's no numbers or anything in it. That is the email address we have set up for the channel. And once we get going and once we start uploading, it's going to be on a pretty regular schedule. And it is going to be just encompassing everything. I'm very interested for us to start doing weird stuff. That I'm a bit of a weird person. I like going to a YouTube channel and being like, or YouTube video and be like, I have no idea what to expect from this. So that is what we're going to be doing. But yeah, it's a storyproof at gmail.com. We should start uploading videos here probably January or February of 2024. And then once we start, it's just going to be video after video from there.
Excellent. Well, Bradley, before we bring it to a close, what's your favorite movie or TV show that you've seen recently that you just want to gush about and tell everybody, drop everything right now and go and watch it, or else?
I'm watching Marco Polo for like the 8 millionth time. It was a criminally short show that was on Netflix. It's got Benedict Wong in it playing Kublai Khan, and it is one of my favorite shows ever. But it kills me because I think it's a great show. It's fantastic. They said it was pretty expensive to make, but it shows. Everything is just so quality. The characters are great. The writing's fantastic. But it's one of those things where there are two shows for me. Marco Polo and then The Legend of the Seeker. That one's a little bit older. where both of the shows had 2 seasons. The first season ended, and that could have been it. That could have been the end of the season. The series, it could have ended there. But instead, they did a second season, and then that one ends on a cliffhanger, and then that's where the show got canceled. That should be illegal. That kills me that's what happened. I mean, with Legend of the Seeker, it was a little bit more definitive of an ending. I mean, with Marco Polo season 2, when it ends, dude, you don't know who's dead. You don't know who's alive. You don't know what happened.
You don't know if Pressure John really exists.
Dude, it kills me that's how it ends.
I know. Believe me, I was destroying stuff because I was like, I want to know more.
Dude,
like, what the hell?
It is such a good show. I enjoy it. It's just so much. It might sound a little weird. I really like a lot of Asian stuff, so a lot of Asian culture, particularly Asian food. I know that sounds a little weird to say, but
I'm Asian, so it's not too weird.
But see, so much stuff that we have for movies and TV shows when it talks about Asian culture, so much of it is Chinese and Japanese. That's like the 2 things. So this show, you get a fair bit of Chinese, but you get the Mongolian side. So you get a lot of really cool costumes in the show. You get a lot of really cool music, where the Mongolians, they do a lot of their throat singing. And dude, they've got a lot of those kind of people in there, and it's so freaking cool to get to see like the Mongol culture represented this way. And yeah, casting is just fantastic. I love the show so much, and yeah, I'm watching it for like the 8 millionth time. I've watched those 2 seasons so many times.
Now didn't it come out prior to Game of Thrones?
I don't think so. I don't think it's quite that old.
Okay. Because I remember watching it. I remember watching it a few years after I graduated from college. So,
yeah, it is. It says it looks like 2014 is when it came out.
Okay. So Game of Thrones probably would have been in its like second season. I'm guessing at that point.
Roughly, yeah.
Okay.
Oh God, yeah, it is that old. Yeah, and it. I will say, like, quality wise, it's fantastic. It just. That was around the time when the idea of a TV show on Netflix was a little strange to me, because they talk about, ratings and it bringing in money, but I was like, it's on a streaming service. That's such a weird thing to.
Yeah, it's such a weird metric to use. Yeah.
Yeah, because especially back at the time, I still knew Netflix not as a streaming service, but as you get DVDs in the mail. That was how I knew Netflix for a long time, and I think even back then, I don't remember watching Netflix in college. I remember still having my DVD collection.
I was going to say Blockbuster Video had shifted to the same model as Netflix. I mean, who knows? It still would be here today. So
yeah. Oh my God.
It's like this true crime documentary is brought to you by Blockbuster Video.
That'd be fantastic.
Oh my God! Like I would love to see that happen at some point. But Bradley, I just want to thank you for taking the time out of your day to be on the podcast. I know, especially since Christmas is on Monday. I can't thank you enough for being on the show, and the invitation's open for you and Brendan to come on to the podcast anytime. We would love to have you come on and guest analyze a movie or TV show, or even do a trailer reaction with us. So
yeah. It's been a lot of fun. Like I said, man, I love hanging out and talking about stuff that we all enjoy.
Yeah.
So I'll definitely talk to Brendan and see if we can work something out.
Yeah, and I've seen this happen quite a lot, where different YouTubers will kind of get together and collaborate. I mean, I would love for the Movie Pope and Story Proof to kind of get together and kind of, I wouldn't say duke it out, but
No, that'd be cool. I'd be down.
Excellent. All right. Well, I just want to thank everybody for taking the time to watch this video. It's a little weird because, like I said, Bradley, you're the last guest of 2023, but this episode will be airing in mid-January of 2024. But for all of you watching, thank you so much for taking the time to, stick out through this video. Have a safe and happy holiday. And remember to like, comment, subscribe. And as always, thank you so much for watching. Catch you on the flip side.